Thanks very much for the introduction, Annie. So I think I have some very keen panelists, but before I call them to the stage, I would just like to relate something which I didn't hear at DTW because I actually wasn't there, but I read about it after the event. So I think that it was the CEO of Axiata explained that there's $1 trillion opportunity for telcos in the emerging services market, and that's on top of their existing $1 billion of the connectivity that they already provide. So I think that sets the scene for the panel that we're having today, which is open infrastructure, disaggregated, and open for business. So I will call my panelists to the stage, starting with Viraj Abhayawardhana from Liberty Global, sorry to damage your name, Director of Network Strategy. Nektaria Efthymiou from BT. So Nektaria, since a few days, has been Network Platform and Security Research Director. Idir Fodil from Orange. Idir is SVP Strategy for Transformation and Performance. And last but not least, Ignacio Gonzalez from Red Hat. And Ignacio is responsible for business development for the media and telco vertical in the EMEA region. Okay, so I think that what the CEO of Axiata was really referring to in his $1 billion market was obviously the APIs, the ability of the telcos to expose their networks. But in fact, those APIs, they're very topical, but they're part of a transformation journey. And I would be interested in hearing, perhaps starting from the telcos, so perhaps starting with you, Idir, if that's okay. Yeah. What does open architecture actually mean within your organization?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Open architecture within Orange International, as I'm representing Orange International Networks, consists in definitely providing network that I call behaving like cloud, meaning that if we look some years before, all our infrastructure was designed, built in kind of rigid boxes, and any time we would like to deploy any new services, any new features, meet customer requirements and demand, was taking a lot of time. We started moving to this open architecture or open framework in the sense that all our infrastructure are APIs by default, meaning that we provide an in-demand services and journey to our customers. This is the first pillar. And in order to have this APIization, one of the main and strong elements to achieve it is to have open infrastructure, meaning that from our perspective in Orange International, the open infrastructure, we have all capabilities to act on it, to modify some configurations, sometimes to add some figures, and at the end, we are more or less mastering most of the softwares that are providing services and running on top of our infrastructure.
Thanks, Idir. So perhaps moving on to Liberty Global with you, Viraj.
Hi. Firstly, thanks for having me, and good afternoon, good morning to everyone. So as Nirali said before, our business is more like a federated business. So we have different opcos in European countries, so VMO2 in UK, Sunrise in Switzerland, Telnet in Belgium, etc. And the disaggregation question is what I see is different. The drivers are different. So if you take, for example, VMO2, they are, as an example, again, they're looking at disaggregation for vendor diversity, particularly with radio access networks. So they are running a pilot with on Open RAN, and others are doing as well, which is not in the public domain yet. It's also about new monetization models. So, for example, in Telnet, which was publicized in the Mobile World Congress, of using APIs to showcase how a programmable network can drive new use cases, new monetization models. It's about AI and automation, and I'll talk at length about that, how we are using in our networks. And also it's about innovation. So, there's a lot of new innovative applications being brought, and that's been pervasively used across our opcos. So to me, it's all of those, but the drivers and how the opcos are moving into these disaggregated networks are based on different drivers.
And sorry, perhaps a question specific for you, Viraj. Are you talking about disaggregation both in the mobile and the fixed domain? Both in the mobile and the fixed network?
Yes. So it depends. Yeah, we have converged operators, and they're using that in both fixed and mobile.
Thank you. Nektaria?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it's more about the why before we say the how. So if we step back a little bit and see how this industry performs, and we look, actually a recent study from DCIT, I believe it was, they show that in the sector, the ARPU drop since 2013, dropped 35%. And in the last quarter, across the sector, the service revenue has also fallen by 0.3%. So to me, there is actually a point here where we need to find different ways of reinventing ourselves. We need to try to drive growth in our networks. And so open now networks is what is going to effectively enable this. And for me, open networks is the networks that telcos can offer open APIs for other partners in the ecosystem to deliver solutions to solve their problems. That is going to drive growth, but at the same time, we need also to drive efficiencies in the network. So we need to start thinking, apart from how we can open up our networks and offer these APIs with delayering architectures, we need to start thinking how can we drive efficiencies, and efficiencies through cloudification, through automation. And of course, underneath the pillar for all this is security. We need to make sure our networks are secure, especially when we start opening them. And also data fabric is quite fundamental in order for all this to work together. So for me, there's the technical factors of driving openness in the network, and the why is driven primarily by the performance of the industry for the last decades. But also, and I don't think it's just the technical aspect, there are also bigger questions we need to ask as an industry, is how we can enable, so let's say we open our networks and we offer the networks to others to use and develop services. There's a bigger question on how do we drive the demand and how do we drive the adoption. So for me then, outside of the technical element, there's the ecosystem. How do we build this ecosystem of partners? How do we bring developers in our networks to start using and developing applications to drive demand and adoption? And also we need to look inwards and see, as organizations operating traditionally the way we operate in a linear model, we produce a product and we sell. If we now start talking about open networks, where we open the networks and we start moving into more platform models, what do we need to change operationally in order for us to be fit for moving into this area? So for me, there are three aspects, the technological, the economical, and also the operational.
Thanks, Nektaria. So I think we'll go a little bit more into the third one in a later question, but thank you very much. So Ignacio, perhaps if you could give us your perspective as a vendor of what it means for telcos to become, to have open architecture.
Sure.
What the journey has been in what you have observed.
And thank you so much for having me here. I think at the end of the day, if I have to summarize, I have to use one word, which is choices. That's what we're trying to get with when we talk about open networks. I fully agree. This is not just about technology. This is about also people and processes. And the telco industry, they need to change significantly in order to achieve that. We are seeing what other businesses are trying to do in order to, I'm not saying of copy, or try to get these advantages. We have seen that the operational model that we have today, and it has been here for many, many years, is one of the things that we have to change. And they are focused, telcos are really focused on changing this operational model. And probably what we are seeing is when you have an open network, when you have this consistency in what we need to find something tangible, is a horizontal platform, let's say, where you can deploy your different applications and services in a consistent way, is what we believed. And telcos are seeing these benefits when it comes to, let's say, embrace these open networks.
Thank you. So I think my next question is very much picking up on the topic that you brought, Nektaria. So the general wisdom is that open architectures and open networks lead to a better ability to innovate and do so more quickly, thus generating business benefits. But open architecture in its own right, or on its own, is unlikely to generate this. So what are the other key ingredients in that particular secret sauce? And perhaps, I don't know, Nektaria, you were already mentioning a few. So perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more on what you started on the first question, and then...
Okay. As I said, on the technical aspect, for me, there are a couple of things that they need to happen, not necessarily sequential, but they all need to come together. First of all is the APIs. We need to... Actually, APIs is not new in our industry. We do use APIs. In fact, BT, we do have an API portal. But it's a question about standardized APIs in order to drive scale, and there's a lot of activity around the Camara APIs. The other element is, and it was mentioned earlier actually, about how we can delayer our networks, so all the ODA architectures, separating OSS from BSS, and actually start thinking how we can expose this capability to others to use. So that is a big step, I believe, for us as telco operators to start thinking how we can start exposing these network capabilities. And actually, it's for the first time, what actually is quite interesting in this industry, we tend to find the problem, find the solution, and then we solve the problem and the solution. And it is the first time that actually, if we start exposing those capabilities with APIs, we may need to start thinking that perhaps we don't even know how these APIs will be used. What are the solutions that the customer of the customer is going to solve by using these APIs? So that is a big step. So how we can delayer and expose these capabilities. Disaggregation, Viraj mentioned disaggregation, quite important to enable this flexibility. And then we discussed in the morning, there was a presentation on cloudification. Cloud nativeness is going to help us move into this hyperscale economics where we can have the flexibility to move the capacity where we need it. So for me, these are, if you like, the fundamental ingredients that the industry is talking quite a lot these days. And of course, automation is quite important. If we want to drive scale, we need to have automation in the networks. So this is that. And then maybe I will expand a little bit on the ecosystem, which for this one, for me, it's about the developers. And how can we start thinking how we can bring developers into our networks? And actually, I have said that before, but 3/4 of developers, 3 out of 4 quarters of developers, they don't really understand what telco APIs do. And of course, they don't need to understand what telco APIs do. So we do need to change our language. We need to make it more simple. We need to remove the complexity of our networks and create this abstraction layer so the developer can actually use these APIs and these capabilities for what they need to solve the problem. And in a recent report from Kearney, they do say that once the developer understands what the network APIs do, 63% of those, they believe 5G network APIs, they can actually start adding value to what they're doing. So we need to simplify and explain what exactly we are offering. And we need to offer this frictionless adoption we need to offer simplicity as well. So 50% of the developers, they do want simplicity. They do want to have this integration, migration, discoverability, and they do want to have these collaboration sites. They don't want really to change the way they work. They want to continue working in the tools they have. So we need to actually step back and think how we can change the way we do in order to open up this developer pathway for telco APIs. So for me, that is quite important, how we can bring developers and adoption into our network. And then on the technology, as I said, the 3 ingredients.
Thank you. Viraj, I can see you.
Yeah, if I may give some color to what Nektaria just said. So I completely agree. We have to adopt standardized APIs. But this was something that was demonstrated at the Mobile World Congress, where one of our opcos, Telnet, worked with a developer and exposed some of the network capabilities via the APIs to give a really compelling use case. And the use case was in Antwerp. So the location was Antwerp, the Antwerp port, which is the second most used port in Europe, and it I think processes something like thousands of goods, and there's so many vessels, and there's one company that they're called CFA, and how they manage unmanned vessels in that very busy environment. And how they managed that was using the 4K feeds coming to a central control center, and there are some operators who are managing those vessels. And as you can appreciate, it's a very, very congested environment, as well as it has all the what you call the very not conducive for radio environments. Mm-hmm. So what did Telnet do? They created some slices, and they exposed the slices through APIs, and the APIs were quality on demand and location. But using that, they were able to improve the productivity, and how the API was consumed was using a developer called EMEA. So what is the secret sauce? The secret sauce was not just the APIs, but working with the application developer. And it was application developer actually driving that. It wasn't kind of us pushing the technology to them. They came with a very compelling use case, and then they're able to demonstrate the value. So what do we need to do? We need to drive adoption, have scale, as well as use standardized APIs, and work with the developers.
So maybe before I move on to Idir, if you want to add anything, I think just the 2 comments I wanted to make on this, and I think the use case you're describing is quite compelling. But certainly what I have heard, speaking with other telcos who want to sell their APIs, is that for some of them, they haven't got any relationship with the developers at all. So there is this issue that they would love to reach out to the developers, but they don't know the first step because they're just completely new to that particular community. So I'd be really interested in hearing how the panelists have actually established that ecosystem. And then the second aspect is that there are already things that the developers are doing without having visibility of the telco networks because they couldn't get access to it before and they still needed to do the application. So for some of those use cases that are already fulfilled, there would need to be a significant amount of recoding, which actually makes the network API not that attractive. So these are just 2 comments I wanted to make. And I don't know if the panel has anything to add. I mean, in particular, I think from my point of view, the key issue for lots of telcos is this issue with absence of ecosystem of developers. They just don't have the organization in place. They don't have the links necessarily with that particular community. And then there's the issue of language, as you have said, is being able to speak to each other.
Maybe I can give a bit my thoughts on that one. I think you're quite right, but I believe we need to step back a little bit and think how we can do things differently. Because all these years we are used to being in control. We are actually the ones that we offer the solution. We are the ones that we design a solution to solve a problem. So now it's not us. So we need to think how we can create this ecosystem that is going to take us into the pathway to developers. And that ecosystem may include other partners that they have already established channels with developers, and we need to work with them to get to those developers that we cannot reach ourselves. Or it might be our customers that they already have the ecosystem of developers to actually help us doing that, or platform providers, or aggregators, even hyperscalers. And we probably need to reset how we see things a little bit in terms of the partnership. Hyperscalers today, they do have a developer community. Developers can access their platforms and they use APIs. So why not? And why not this be a partner ecosystem that actually everybody is using to do good and provide solutions to solve their problem, rather than us be always in the driving seat offering a solution for a problem. Maybe we don't, and I don't think we do know all the problems we can solve. We know what we know, but if we offer the tools and the platforms, then effectively we enable this, we unlock more opportunities for us and for others. So that's my take on that.
Well, very quick here. I think one of the things that we have seen lately changing more is that telcos, finally, they are not so shy to be part of other communities. They are also participating in certain events and certain community programs that before, for whatever reason, they were not interesting or they were not evaluating to be there. And at the end of the day, this is a fantastic way to finally express what are your needs. Also networking. You're going to do plenty of networking there. And collaborate, which at the end of the day is one of the things that be part of the telco is not a VIP club only for you. You need to, let's say, open the doors and mingle with more other people on other communities to make sure that they're understanding what are your problems, because I'm sure that you have specific problems that they are only, let's say, available for telcos, but at the same time you will see that there are other challenges and other issues that are shared, and you will see and you will find a way to tackle.
Thank you. So perhaps moving on to what does it mean from the inside to become a telco with an open architecture? So what are the changes that are needed organizationally for telco to be able to leverage the open architecture? So I can see there that you're nodding, so I'm very happy to give you the floor. I think what I'm also interested in hearing from the telcos on the panel is how specifically for API they organize themselves in order to actually bring an API, a new network API to market. But we can park that one. You can just answer the first question if you'd rather, Idir.
Thank you. I will just answer on which organization challenge we have to work on to move from, or accompany this moving toward open infrastructure and disaggregated one. Just a few words, within my organization, specifically on Orange International, we work with B2B and wholesale customers, and we have name to call open infrastructure, which is softwareized infrastructure, meaning that we believe that today it's no more the classical infra, but it's more software infra. This does not mean that before we don't have software in our infrastructure, we have it, but the way we tend today to use software in our infrastructure has totally changed, in the sense that you have the first part, which is the disaggregation, and in the sense that for disaggregation we will more and more rely on white boxes, and on top of which we will have operating systems, sometimes open one from open source, sometimes from vendors. And the second part is cloudification, and we got the speak about Vodafone, and we see that today from telco perspective, we need to review our architecture, in the sense that most of our functions, not all, but most of them should go to cloud, and this this put on the table that the fact we need to review our architectures. It says that we will have less and less intelligence in the cores and edge and more intelligence at some centralized point. Third point on API. So we had a great description of what should be the API, and today you have TMF, MEF APIs, and you can order, for example, links from international side to any from point A to B between many operators using MEF API. We have also initiative around the camera, and the last point in the softwareization journey is data and AI. And why we call it in Orange softwareization? Because I can take small example that I honestly like is SD1. SD1 is time when operators have seen that they have been disaggregated by others, in the sense that we were providing all in the network, and some companies come and put the network more or less just for transport and provided all the intelligence on top of this. And this SD1 and other we have today is softwareization. And in terms of organization challenge, the main challenge is that we have from telco operator to change our way of work, in the sense that before we were working, and I think this is most case of telco operators, we design our architecture, we specify it, we put requirements, we issue RFPs, we discuss with vendors, we get the solution, we test them, we validate, etc., and sometimes it takes some years. And we have to move from this point to a point where we build our infrastructure with the vendors. But most of the infrastructure, we will master it. So, and if there is any problem, we are part of who will solve the problem, in the sense that for some software part, for some APIs, for some troubleshooting, we are acting, we have the developers to change, to modify. So this is the main change, is that we move from kind of legacy way of building the infrastructure and network to new way of working, in which we have great contribution and huge contribution to the build and to the operation of this network. And at the same time, we move to what we call, I would say, agile way of work, in the sense that all this we will build it step by step. So this is the main challenge, and we typically in Orange, in some areas, we have already taken this challenge and put a new organization schema. For example, I would take an example in France, on some part of our B2B networks, we have equipments that are totally built by an Orange engineer for software part. And this is complete change in our organization.
That sounds like a lot of retraining.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. And honestly, this change also is really interesting, because today, if you would like to attract talent in the network area, in the infrastructure area, most of the talents and people will be attracted if you have big part on which you have software and development. And this change is really very, very interesting, attracting people, keeping our talents, upskilling them, and also at the end, as I told in the beginning, our main objective is to have really this new networks behaving as cloud, meaning that we can have in-demand services, we can scale up, scale down, as we want, we can manage our resources, add new services quickly, and at the end meet our customer demands.
Thank you. Perhaps going to you, Viraj, if you want to add anything, or is there anything you can tell us, perhaps a bit practical things about how you organize yourself internally to develop the network APIs, or if that is looked after by a certain team, like it is in some telcos, I believe, or if it's more scattered around the organization, perhaps the effort?
So, we have as I said, like a federated group of companies who are much more autonomous. But they are pretty nimble in the sense that they have small organizations that allow them to compete with the incumbents in the respective markets. So one of the things that they are doing is, as it is said, is on the organizational change. So how do you bring together these different organizational departments together? So, for example, if it's in the radio access networks and making it open and disaggregated, now the ways of working are slightly different. So they need to bring in not just the engineering team, the operational team, but also the cloud team as well. And that is quite a big change for us, for the organizations that we run. But at the same time, because they are small and nimble, they're being able to adapt much more quicker. One of the challenges is delivering like the equal and parity. What I mean by that is, the open and disaggregated networks are great, but they also need to be competitive. So that they are also trying to work out in making it more efficient and giving the same kind of quality of service to the network as well as our customers.
Okay. So it's a little bit after past. I just want to leave some time, not quite yet, but soon, to ask the floor if they want to raise their questions. So just get those questions ready. And I'll make sure that we have a good 10 minutes to quiz our panel. So can the panel give me what they see as perhaps the main hurdle or hurdles with an S to telco leveraging their open infrastructure? What do they see as the main things that they have to overcome?
I can start because I'm more neutral. I can see that from the operational point of view, internally, how they can organize themselves. They are struggling. I'm going to give you one example from, we were having a few months ago, one discussion with one big operator here in Europe about how to automate everything, blah, 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 blah. And we say, yeah, let's start with implementing a GitOps approach. Let's try to go there. And the first reaction was, hold on a minute, we are going to have to change the whole organization for adopting that. Yeah. Yes, probably. But what you want to achieve? You want to achieve efficiency, or you want... So my point is, there is this mindset in terms of the organization that is still very deep root in many telcos, and I believe that this is, from what we are seeing, the biggest hurdle, how they're going to change and adapt the organization from our point of view, from Red Hat point of view.
As I said, in BT, we already have APIs. We are exposing APIs, so that is not new. Perhaps what is different is we need to change the way we see APIs compared to our traditional core products. APIs, and actually STL has done a very good analysis on API families, which is very interesting. So instead of looking, because in the traditional model, we have a core product and the value differentiation is from that product. But in the platform model, the value comes from the number of transactions that happen on the platform. So this is a mindset shift. I don't think we need to change. I mean, it can be a hybrid model where you have still what you do, but also you have the platform. And this is what companies like Amazon and Apple, they do. They have their core products, and also they have a platform that they enable others to sell their services and products. So it's a similar model, but still, this is a mindset change. How we can actually start approaching this differently. How do we start seeing the platform model, if you like, compared to how we're used to. So that is a change. That's probably the main one I see, is this mindset change and how we can start seeing products, APIs as a product. API is a product, it has a life cycle, and you need to maintain it, you need to have product managers and end-to-end, make sure that it works in order to provide to your partners to use through the platform. So it's a different mindset to what we're used to. So that's probably what I think is the main one.
Thank you.
So if I may, so my mindset, absolutely. So the change ways of working and changing that. But looking from our, of course, point of view, now, how do you manage the infrastructure that these new platforms are going to deliver? It has to be as close as, or at least being very close to the operation model that they have today. Now, take for example, like let's take like, you know, we like to open our networks, we like to deploy Open RAN, but you know, for many of our opcos who are like brownfield operators, it has to coexist with the existing infrastructure. So, for example, it'll be like the purpose-built RAN for majority of the network, and then you have this new thing coming along called, you know, Open RAN or open networks. So, if that means that you need to have a completely different operating model to manage a smaller number of, you know, small proportion of your network, that is indeed quite a big challenge, and in particular, that is quite evident when you look at in the Open RAN side of things. So that is one of the big challenges we are trying to address right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. From my perspective, I think that the main challenge is the operating model, because I believe that one of the main transformation within telco is to move our operating model toward what we call product-oriented organization, meaning that if we talk about API, about open, about disaggregation, this means that we have many products that we are assembling each other, and product itself means that the way we were working before, in the sense that we have teams working on engineering, teams working on deployment and operation, should evolve toward a unified team working on one product. So for me, this is really the main challenge, and within Orange, we already started building those, what we call product-oriented organization.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, thank you. So I think it might be time to go to the floor for your questions. I think we have one at the front. I'm sure we have more questions than that. Come on, it's EPI.
I'm sure there will be more. Very interesting insights from the panel. Somebody at the start, Emma, it might have been you. You put that magic number in the air that scares everybody. You know, the $1 trillion, trillion euros. It doesn't matter what the currency is at that point. That sort of number, you're talking crazy stuff. I'd like to get a sense from the panelists. Just, you know, you're not going to be quoted on this, but rough order of magnitude. When we talk about network APIs and creating new revenue, just help us calibrate. You know, what's this worth to you? Is this, broadly speaking, are we talking sub 50 million euros, dollars, pounds, whatever, 100 million or billions? How on earth do we get to a trillion number? Let's put that to one side, because that's clearly nuts. But relative to your other lines of business, how important is this? And is this a real growth factor for you, or is it? I'm leaving aside all the internal use of network APIs to simplify the internal plumbing. That's a different issue. When you talk about exposing and putting it out there, it's got to be worth it. So just a number, a range for each of you, what's this worth? What do you expect it to be worth? Whether it is worth that or not, but I mean, why do it at all?
So I think STL, you guys said something like 35 billion, am I right? So we are working through, but unfortunately, we are more circumspect to be accurate, and right now we are trying to kind of understand what are the APIs that can be monetized and can be prioritized. So one of the most obvious ones are, you know, with the financial sector being used, like the swim swap, and they are the ones that are going to be, I suppose, low-hanging fruit. I would not want to put that like a number right now, but we think it's much lower than that. But it's a sizable opportunity, certainly.
Low millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. I mean, just rough order of magnitude.
Trillions.
We like to think, yeah, in that million to billion range, let's say. For the whole market, not just, yeah. Yeah.
Where do you put R&D? What do you expose?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same question we had about AI. What's worth doing?
Yeah.
And if none of this moves the needle, if all it does is means you can be more productive from an IT development point of view, well, fine, but that's not driving revenue. So that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
What your expectations broadly are, and where does it stack up? Because remember, products, APIs are products. They're not plumbing. So if they're products, that means they've got an expectation as to whether they're going to be successful in the market or not successful. And the easiest way to measure that is how much revenue you're making, and the second, how much profit you're making. Different issue, but that's all I'm trying to understand is where you put this on the stack of things you sell.
Maybe I can add. I'm not going to give you a number, but what I can tell you is, and I will quote STL actually, probably.
Yes, please
we
do.
can use the analysts on this one, which they quote in the range of billions, and then if you scale this down for UK, is in the range of, for the UK market sizing, I have seen, is in the range of billion. Not billions, billion, up to a billion, right? That's what I have seen from analysts. But what I will say, going back to your point about whether this is a sizable opportunity, first of all, APIs, just to make it clear, APIs is not new, right? We are doing APIs in this industry for years, and we are monetizing APIs for years. What is new now is the new standards, the Camara APIs, that are going to expose specific network capabilities that otherwise we wouldn't do. We wouldn't consider exposing them. For example, slicing, quality of demand, which are actually network capabilities that are more complex and you wouldn't think of exposing. And this is what probably all this discussion about the telco APIs is coming from these 5GSA and the 5G APIs. And when I look at, if you step back and see where is the value of those APIs, there are APIs that are going to generate a lot of volume, but maybe not a lot of value. And these are simple APIs that require monitoring or giving some data and status. But then there are some other APIs that are maybe more complex, they require more resources, and those ones, they may generate less volume, but maybe more value. Now, in terms of the number of how much this will be worth to all of us, it's only we will know in when they start actually happening and there's a demand for those APIs, especially with the launch of 5GSA and all this. But in terms of the CPaaS APIs, for example, this is a billions market already, and it has proven itself. So now it's a matter of adding some additional telco APIs to complete the picture. So probably that's what I will, and I will quote the analysts on this one in terms of the value. Thank you.
Time for one more.
Yeah, sorry, interesting discussion. And you're right to say, Nektaria, APIs aren't new. Here's my big challenge is why standardize them, right? Because, oh, well, we all want to be the same, and if developers are working in different countries, I'd love to meet those developers. Don't get me wrong, there's a few of them, but we tend to be focused in our own market. And my fear is that when you standardize things, kind of reduce them to such a low common denominator, they become valueless. And I see that all over the industry. So I'm going to give you guys a free idea today, right? I play video games, right? And it's one of the biggest users of the network on the planet, right? And it irritates the video game developers because they often see Wi-Fi issues that they can't debug. And if they had an API to the home gateway that says what's going on with Wi-Fi, they could tell their user something bad is happening, do this. And you could expose that to them tomorrow. They would love it. They would bite your hand off for it. I've spoken to them. And not only that, it would stop them phoning you to say, my Wi-Fi is really bad, or I'm going to cancel because my game isn't playing well and I'm going to move somewhere else. So forget all this other stuff that no one's going to, the stuff that's in Camara, no one's going to buy that. You're going to give it away for nothing. It is not going to generate any value. Think of the things in the network that you do today that drive real value for customers and put APIs into that. The developers will come and don't standardize it. Hey, go phone Microsoft and say, hey, we can put this into every Xbox, right? They'll bite your hand off for it and they'll pay you big time for it because it saves them money. Last night, Microsoft had a massive authentication issue. It would have been great for you to have been able to pick that up and say, actually, there's a problem here, don't call us, we know about it, it's happening. So those are the sort of APIs that will drive value. The stuff that's been standardized, in fact, this isn't the first time it's been standardized. The same APIs were standardized 4 years ago, and unsurprisingly, no one's using them. So I would really drive towards that, and also I would question with AI, how valuable is a standardized API going to become? Full stop. Anyway, that was my point, more than a question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the discussion. I think it was really good. So I think in terms of actually developing the skills in-house for things like the infrastructure and managing it and being able to own it actually, how much do you think we should balance between that and focusing on the actual activities that we can get out the value of this disaggregated technologies from? So how much time do we need to spend on managing this infrastructure that we create versus that we need to spend on actually bringing in the value out of these technologies?
Yeah, very good question. Definitely, when we started on disaggregation, and I will talk about the part I'm working on IP networks, layer 2. Definitely for any components, before we move to disaggregation, we have kind of, I would say, financial and technical evaluation. And the evaluation globally is that we have number of people, maximum number, that we can put on this activity. If the evaluation shows, for example, that we need to put, I don't know, I will take number, for example, 30 developers to develop new functions and maintain, and that the return on investment is lower, definitely we will not put it. So it's case by case. But generally speaking, we have an evaluation, and the main important element is that the people that are developing the product, generally on top of open sources elements, those are the people that after will have all the layer 3 expertise. So we are combining those, so the developers having this expertise. And at the beginning, what we have did is that we keep the same operating model in the sense that with the run teams, and now we are moving this to a more integrated team. But to ask directly your question, it's case by case, and you are totally right. You need to balance, as you know, between the cost for doing things and the time to have it versus what you need to manage at that time.
From our, of course, point of view, so as I said, they are very lean. The in-house development is not the first point of call that they'll do, but then they'll find the most efficient way of doing things. So,
thank you very much. Thank you to your panel.